Hello and welcome back once again to a rewatch of The Wheel of Time, right before Season 2 is released on September 1st. Today we're talking about Episode 3, which, again, I'm still not copying down the names of the episodes. I really should be, but oh well, we'll just have to carry on. But this episode and Episode 4 are directed by Wayne Yip. Wayne Yip just started off as a music video director, I believe. He directed a few episodes of Doctor Who from the Peter Capaldi era, if I remember right. And after The Wheel of Time, he went on to direct a couple episodes of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. So, he's got a little bit under his belt, and these episodes were really well done, so I look forward to seeing what he works on in the future. The cold open of this one takes place a few days before. It takes place right at the end of Episode 1. And it follows Nynaeve. Now, if you remember from the last one, Nynaeve, at the end of Episode 1, Nynaeve was dragged off by Trollocs. She was presumed dead. And at the end of Episode 2, she shows up and tells Lan, take me to my people or you're going to die. This cold open is basically just a fantastic scene of Nynaeve escaping the Trolloc after the battle at Winternight, a massacre. And basically it happens because, the Trolloc is dragging her away. He comes across another Trolloc who's injured and decides to just, gut him and start feeding. And Nynaeve wakes up, sees what's going on, and just takes off running in the other direction. She runs through the woods a little bit, comes across the cave with the sacred pool, and decides to hide in it. The Trolloc notices that she's leaving and starts chasing after her. When he gets to the cave, she's hiding in the pool. He doesn't see her or anything, so he kind of gets in the water, and you see her basically slowly rise up out of the water behind him, grabs a dagger from his belt, and then just stabs him in the back. It was the most badass Nynaeve moment so far. Absolutely love it. Zoe Robbins did such a fantastic job. Love. So of course then it goes from there to the opening credits, and then it picks back up with Nynaeve standing over Lan saying take me to my people, and he just tells her listen, the Dark One is coming. The Trollocs and monsters that are after them, the Dark One is the reason why. But Moraine is injured. She can help you find them, but we need to get her better. Will you help? And she's like, yeah, no. Instead of just saying no, she attacks him. And then Lan knocks her out, but he's kind of impressed by it still. And so then it cuts from there, and it goes to one of the other groups. So this one is Rand and Mat, because remember they split up. Rand and Mat in one part of the journey, Perrin and Egwene in another. Rand and Mat are walking along. They seem to be in a little mountainous region at the moment, or at least in a very hilly region, and they are discussing what they're going to do. Mat's like, we should go back home. Rand's like, no, remember Moraine said that those monsters are after us. Besides, Egwene's going to the White Tower, so that's where I'm going to go too. After that, it cuts to Egwene and Perrin, and they are all alone. They're in the cold. They're being pursued by wolves. They want to get a fire started to keep the wolves at bay. Perrin is having a lot of trouble using the dagger that Mat gave him in the last episode, the one that his wife made, to try and start a fire. It's not working. And Egwene basically tries her best to channel and start a fire, and they get one going. And Perrin looks at her and is like, wait, did you do that? And he was like, okay. It's like, I'm going to have to get used to it, but all right. After they get the fire started, they're trying to decide where they're going to go. And Egwene's like, I don't know, I should probably go back to the Two Rivers. That's where Rand's going to go. And Perrin says, no, Rand's going to the White Tower. And Egwene's like, why? And he's like, Rand is going to think that you're going to the White Tower, so that's where he's going. And he's going to go wherever he thinks you are. So, Perrin knows his boy. So after that, it cuts back to Lan, Moraine, and Nynaeve. And Nynaeve is tied to a tree. Lan is doing his best to take care of Moraine, but she is not doing well. He looks over at Nynaeve and is like, hey, are you going to help now? And she's like, maybe. And Lan's like, listen, you could try something again. I'll tie you back up. So he releases Nynaeve. Nynaeve says she'll help, but she wants something in return. She wants to find Rand, Mat, Perrin, and Egwene. and she wants Moraine and Lan to take her to them. So Lan releases her. She goes off to get some herbs and starts making a poultice for Moraine. Once she does what she can for Moraine, Lan asks her, can I ask you a question? And she's like, yeah, you can ask anything you want. And so Lan asks a question. How did you track us? And Nynaeve, in another perfect Nynaeve moment, she's like, well, listen, I said you could ask. I didn't say I'd answer. And just walks off. They do discuss the warder bond a little bit. How does it work? It's kind of exposition for us, the viewers, so that we understand a little bit about how Moraine and Lan are connected, because it seems to be a little bit more than friendship. It's not romantic type love or anything like that. So what is it? Well, there's a special connection that they have, and it has to deal with the one power and that sort of thing. After Nynaeve gets done making the poultice, she applies it to Moraine, and then they have to sit down and wait for a little bit to see if it'll start working. With that, we cut back to Perrin, and Perrin is having a dream of his own. In his dream, he's back in his forge, or the forge in the Two Rivers for him and his wife, and he sees a wolf eating something, and as he walks around the corner, he sees that it's his dead wife, and his dead wife turns and looks at him with these dead, just fogged over eyes, and it freaks him out, and he turns around, and there's the man with the ember eyes again. So, it's this guy's continuing to invade people's dreams. So after that, after he's grabbed by the man with the ember eyes, he wakes up, and the wolves are there. They're close, they're scared, so they start running. And then it switches to Rand and Mat. Rand and Mat are just, they're still, heading towards the White Tower as best they can. They know it's somewhere east, but they don't know the exact directions. And they come across a small mining town sitting on the river. And as they approach the town, they look and they see a man dressed in garb unlike anything that we've seen in the show so far. And he's pelted, he's dead, but he's, stuck full of arrows. He's just hanging in a cage. So they go into the town. They go and they find a tavern, someplace they can sit down, get a meal, have a drink. And while they're there, they sit down. Basically the owner or bartender, the tavern keeper, approaches him. It's a black lady, and I have not remembered her name. I forgot to write it down. It's an awesome character, but I can't remember her name, and I'm sorry about that. So, anyways, it's just going to be referred to as her or she from now on. But anyways, she approaches them and brings them a drink, and he says, listen, we only have money for food, but we're looking for some friends of ours. We want to know if they came this way. And she says the only person that's been here, the only new person that we've had in town aside from you guys, is a gleeman. And it cuts to a man approaching a stool or a table to sit on, and he sits down and strums his lute a little bit, and then just starts singing a song. And this is how we're introduced to Tom Merrilin, another prominent character from the book, and the actor does a really good job of portraying him in the show. Once he gets done with the song, he gets up and he starts going around to different people and saying, coins for the gleeman. It's a really well done song, and I will not burden your ears with my attempt to butcher it. As Tom, the gleeman, approaches Mat and Rand, someone bumps into Mat and steals coins, and then the gleeman bumps into that guy and steals them back. But Mat or Rand doesn't know it until the gleeman kind of points it out. He's like, listen, they try to pay for their meal, they're not able to, and the gleeman hands them money and then shows them the thing yeah, you lost this. And Matt's like, can I have it back? And he's like, no, we're gonna coins for the gleeman, and we're gonna leave this as an expensive lesson for you to always watch your back. So with that, we switch back to Perrin and Egwene. It does a lot. The next few episodes switch back and forth quite a bit, so forgive me if I don't use other phrases to describe that. But we go back to Perrin and Egwene, and they're still being pursued by the wolves, but the wolves kind of back off. They find cart trails where it looks like carts and people have passed this way before. So they start heading in the direction that the tracks and the trails are leading off to. And Egwene kind of points out, the wolves never really got that close to us. It was almost like they were herding us to this so that we'd find this. Perrin just kind of stares off in the distance. Back to Rand and Mat. They are trying their best to, basically have a place to stay for that night. So they go up to the tavern keeper and they ask her if they have if there's anything that they can help with. She takes them out back and says, "Yeah, you can chop some firewood." Rand starts chopping the firewood. Matt's like, "Well, you're the one that offered, so I'm gonna go see if I can do something else." Goes back to the tavern keeper, has a really cute little exchange with them where he's like, she's like, "Well, will you do this?" He's like, "Yeah, that's not really my thing." "Well, how about this?" "Well, that's not my thing either." "Well, what are you good at?" And he's like, "Well, back home, I'm a pretty good horse trader." And she's like, hey, everybody, we got a horse trader here with no horses. Oh, great. Putting Matt in his place. It's so good. It's so great. So basically she gives him a couple of drinks and says, "Yeah, take this over to that table over there. They're looking for it. And, you can, if they tip you, you can keep it." After that, we switch back over to Nynaeve and Lan, and the poison obviously isn't working. Lan kind of just looks at Nynaeve and says, "Hey, take care of Moraine. I'll be back in a little while," and just leaves. And Nynaeve is just like, "What? Why are you leaving me here with her? I don't like her. What? No, don't do that." Back once again, it goes to Perrin and Egwene, and they come across the people with the carts and the tracks that they've been following. And it turns out that these are Tinkers, and they're approached by the leader of the Tinkers, Isla and Rain, and then their son Aram as well, or Aram as well. But they're approached, and Ryan kind of comes up and says, "Hey, do you know the song?" Egwene and Perrin just kind of stand around like, "I have no idea what's going on here." And Aram approaches and says, "Okay, listen, we know obviously you don't know the song, otherwise you would have said so. Here's what you say to complete this little introduction ceremony." And they complete the introduction ceremony, and the Tinkers are like, "Hey, why don't you come along with us?" And they're like, "Wait, Tinkers?" They're like, "Yeah, you've heard of us, right? Like, we're the people that steal children in the middle of the night and, do all of this and that." And Isla's like, "It's lies. It's all lies." Like, we travel around, we do what we can and stuff like that. But they're given some food, and they're invited they're invited to stay for as long as they need. Once again, things switch, and it goes back to Rand, and Rand is chopping wood, of course, and he's chopped a lot of wood so far. And the tavern keeper comes up and says basically like, she's like, "Listen, I think you've done enough. Come with me. We'll go ahead and get you your room." And she takes him to the room. Basically the room that him and Matt are going to be staying in for the night. Matt is still, serving tables and doing his own thing. And one of the best things about this whole scene is that the tavern keeper, as she's, taking Rand to the room and basically like making the beds up and stuff like that, she starts talking about like, "Listen, the walls are nice and thick. Sound doesn't really carry. So you and your friend can have all the fun in here that you want." And Rand just looks at her and like, "Oh," and he just looks at her and says, "Nah, if I wanted to pull a man, I could do better." So then it cuts back to Nynaeve sitting there with Moraine, and Lan comes back, and Nynaeve's like, "Where have you been?" And Lan says, "I found what can help Moraine. Gather your things, we're about to go." So then we switch back to Matt, and it's nighttime in the town now, or at least near night. Matt is standing outside the town where the man in the cage is, and he's looking at him, and he's about to start going through the pockets and stuff, and then Tom approaches and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And Matt basically is like, "Yeah, I'm looking for money to get out of here. He doesn't need it anymore." No judgment on Tom's part. He's like, just, "Hey Matt, help me get him down." And so they put they get the IL out of the cage. They lay him down, and then he turns his back and he says, "All right, take all the time you need. Let me know when you're done, and then you're going to help me bury him." Tom gives a little prayer, and then he starts telling Matt about the guys. Like, this guy was an Aiel. They're not from around here, basically. And basically he was talking about how this town didn't understand the Aiel, killed him because he was an outsider. They have their own like code of honor, code of conduct. For instance, one of the things that Tom says is that you're only in danger if they have a veil over their face. And when he does that, he pulls the veil up a little bit and then puts it back down. So you learn a little bit about the Aiel. This goes to show how, even though this particular scene wasn't in the books, this is very, very much like how Robert Jordan wrote his world, where he drops hints and alludes to things that will show up later, or, you know, things that'll happen and he'll allude to it, but it won't happen in the way that you think. He's great at foreshadowing, and he's great at building out the world in small ways to make it feel like a much bigger place than the locations that you're currently reading at. And they do a good job with that similar sentiment in the show. As that is going on with Matt and Tom, Rand is in the room with the tavern keeper, and they're sitting down having a drink, and basically she kind of leans in to kiss him, and he pulls away, and she gets up and she's like, oh no, I made a mistake. And she gets up and starts heading towards the door, and he's like, no, I don't want to give you the wrong idea, you know, I'm not interested in you like that, and that sort of thing. And then she shuts the door and she locks it, and she's like, was it the hair? Was it the braid? And he's like, what? He's like, I thought it would remind you of her, but maybe it worked a little too well. And Rand's like, her? Who do you mean? And she turns around, she's like, Egwene. That's right, I know who you are. And Rand is so confused. But basically she grabs Rand's sword and basically holds him at bay, and is like, the chats that we had, they were wonderful and everything, but you know, the world is not as nice as you seem to think it is. People don't have the choices that you seem to think that they might have. And I've already alerted the Halfman, so he's on his way. And Rand's like, oh, what? You find out that this person is what's known as a dark friend. That's somebody that sold their soul to the devil, for lack of a better equivalency. And she lets Rand know that the room they have in, she was being honest with him when she said that it's very quiet, nobody's going to hear anything. But she also mentions that the door, like 3 men wouldn't be able to open the door once it's closed and locked, and he's not going to be able to at all either. But he starts attacking the door anyways, and then he knocks it down and runs. And she is very surprised by this. So he runs out, and then as he's running away, he runs out of the tavern. He's in the town somewhere, and he stumbles across Matt. Matt's like, hey, what's going on? And Rand's like, she's trying to kill us. And Matt's like, oh, don't tell me twice, and starts chasing after Rand. And there's a little chase through the town, and then they get cornered. And she talks a little bit more about what's going on, and basically like gives a little bit of her life story up until then, how badly she was treated by everybody, how all of her options were taken away, and she felt like the only option that she had was to join the Dark One. And she tells them that she's looking for the Dragon Reborn. She just doesn't know which one it is, not because he wants to destroy the world, but because he wants to save it. He wants to break the wheel. He wants to break the cycle of ages and that sort of thing. Before the conversation can continue much further, a dagger appears in her throat from behind, like, blah, blah, blah. And Tom is like, well, are you just going to stand there? I'm leaving. You need to get out of here. And they're like, what? They're like, boy, she's a dark friend. She said she called the Fae, she called the Murdrell. He's on his way. Do you really want to stay here for that? If not, just get with me and go. They're like, okay, yeah, don't have to tell us twice. We're out of here. And then we switch back to the final scene, and you have Lan, Moraine, and Nynaeve. And they're along a dirt road, basically. And as they're approaching, like, pans up, and you see that there's someone hiding in a tree. And then you see people approach, and you see that it's Leandrin, the lady from the first cold open, the one in red. And she's like, she looks at Lan and Nynaeve, and she's like, oh, are you here to see about the Dragon Reborn that we captured? The scene ends with the camera focusing on a man in a cage. That's how episode 3 ends. So, listen, I gotta say, like, with this episode, every single scene with Nynaeve was just absolutely fantastic. You don't really get a lot of what happens between Lan and Nynaeve during this time. So it's really nice to see them focusing in on this aspect of stuff. So it's been really fascinating. It's been really good. If you've read the books, you know what I'm referring to. If you haven't, you will find out by the end of episode 8. On its own was absolutely fantastic. A lot more happened plot-wise. You learn a lot more about the world. The world building was really built up in this episode. And things in this episode were moving along at a good clip. So, let me know what your favorite scene of this episode was, and let me know, if you like this, hit the like button. feel free to subscribe. Let me know what you think I can do better as I go through and do this rewatch. In the meantime, have a good day.